Bonjour à tout le monde. We had our press conference on Wednesday. We do now another press conference based on a project that we are following since quite now a long time. It's a great project linked to the history, linked to the science, linked to the research called Antikythera, with our head of development who is here under Matthias Butte lead. It's really a great project that will have applications as well on watches, but after they will talk about it more precisely. And there is also another project linked to this Antikythera, which is the Exosuit project. So you have seen the suit, the diving suit that has been created, very high technology, so it's a fusion between history and technology and future as well. And we have here Mr. Brendan Foley, who will tell us a bit more about this project that Hublot is supporting. So Brendan.
Thank you and good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm here to tell you a bit about this project, which was just referred to, the Antikythera Shipwreck. And you may wonder, why is a luxury watchmaker interested in an ancient shipwreck? It's because this is where precision clockmaking began, about 150 BC. The Antikythera mechanism was found on this shipwreck. The wreck was discovered around 1900, 1901, and material was recovered from it, including this one-of-a-kind, unique artifact from the ancient world. It's approximately 70 gears strung together into a train, and what it was, in effect, was a way to predict future events. So it tracked the motions of the planets, the 5 known planets here, the phases of the moon, and on the back face of it, there were 2 interlocking spirals that tracked forward and backward in time lunar and solar eclipses. It'd be very interesting if we had the model to run it through its paces and see if it could predict today's eclipse. So an interesting piece of ancient history and directly applicable to Baselworld and what we're all here for today. The wreck also came with the most exquisite luxury goods that were available in the 1st century BC when we believe this ship sank. So several dozen statues, life-size statues from the classical and Hellenistic world dating back to the 5th century BC of heroes and gods. Most of these were standing proud of the seafloor and therefore were eroded by the action of the water. You can see the figure on the right here. It wasn't made like this, but somehow it's even more evocative in its present state. And the figure here on the left of the wrestler, his shiny right-hand side was down in the sediments, protected from the action of the sea and the organisms that live in the sea, so the Parian marble is still as beautiful as the day it was carved. Other luxury items include glass bowls from all over the Eastern Mediterranean and the Hellenistic world, and of course jewelry. The jewelry was associated perhaps with a female who may have been traveling on board, indicated by these perfume jars, and unguentaria would have held medicines and different sorts of cosmetics perhaps. And just near where these artifacts were found is a skull and jawbone. Very rare to find human remains on an ancient shipwreck. This has been interpreted as the skull, as the skeletal remains of a young woman. So perhaps this is the person who owned those luxury goods that I just showed you. Also on this shipwreck, at least 8 life-size bronze statues, again, of heroes and gods. This could be Paris holding the apple of strife, which launched the Trojan War. It could be Perseus holding the head of Medusa, the Gorgon. We don't know who exactly, but there are many, many other indications that on this shipwreck, still in the sediments, there are more life-size bronze statues from classical antiquity. We have these feet representing in at least a half a dozen more statues. The arm of the boxer, perhaps similar to the boxer statue that usually resides in Rome, which is now on exhibit at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. We think all of these things, all of the rest of these statues, still sit on the shipwreck awaiting discovery. The Greek Ministry of Culture, the effort of underwater antiquities, invited our research group from Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in Massachusetts to come and investigate Antikythera Island and determine what other cultural remains rest on the seafloor. And with Hublot's help and the help of other sponsors, both private foundations and individuals, and the Hellenic Navy, we were able to return to the site the last few years and begin to investigate the seafloor. Hublot's help is without a doubt the critical factor in investigating this shipwreck site. They provided to us dive watches. These watches are beautiful, but the form meets the function. Our entire dive team dived with these watches throughout the Antikythera expedition, and our chief diver, who you see here in the middle next to Matthias Boutet, has been diving every day with his watch since they were provided to us last year. He's taken it deeper than 150 meters, which sounds deep, but this watch is certified to 4,000 meters, so perhaps not so deep after all. Hundreds of dives on the watch. How we went about investigating the site was with advanced technologies. So we took an underwater autonomous robot made by a friend of mine down at University of Sydney, and with it we produced a hyper-precise map of part of the shipwreck site. So this is a topographical map. It's a bathymetric map of the site. The resolution is very, very precise indeed. 1 pixel in this map represents 4 millimeters in real space. That's important because as we excavate, we need to understand how the artifacts recovered from the site relate to one another. It tells us the whole picture of this shipwreck. We started recovering artifacts, including these lead anchor components. These are important because they're part of the ship itself, and again, tell that story of what we're calling the Titanic of the ancient world. But we can also do scientific analyses, lead isotope analyses, which will tell us where the lead was mined, and those will give us indications of where the ship was built. We can tell, again, a fuller, richer story. So we've 3D modeled the artifacts that we've recovered, and here's one other anchor stock that we brought up this past season. And again, isotopic analysis will help us fill in some of the details of this wreck. And other artifacts, including ceramics. So this is a laganos, a table jar. May have held wine. We'll find out what it held because we can do ancient trace DNA analysis and determine what the original contents were, even when the jar no longer holds them. So here's that laganos here. This is one of 49 laganoi that have been recovered from this shipwreck now. Again, giving us a look at how the passengers on board this vessel would have lived. We think that this is the biggest shipwreck from antiquity ever discovered, perhaps 60 meters long, maybe longer. The only ships from great antiquity that were that size were either the stone carriers that took the marble and other stones from the quarries to the construction sites for temples and other edifices, and also ancient grain carriers. And in the 1st century BC, these grain carriers were the supertankers of the ancient world. They had over 1,000 tons capacity. These grain carriers plying the routes between the Black Sea, Alexandria, and Rome, the center of the burgeoning empire, are what allowed Rome to be the first city ever in the world to have a population that exceeded 1 million people. It's been the holy grail of maritime archaeology to find one of these grain carriers, and it's possible that that's what we're seeing here. The question is, how would you pack 36 or 46 ancient life-size statues without breaking them? You couldn't really put them in a crate. There's certainly no bubble wrap in the ancient world. But if you packed them in the hold in grain, that grain would be a paying dunnage. So when you got to your destination, you could unload your statues unbroken, and then the dunnage, that packing material, that grain, could be sold for an additional profit. We found other things besides the lead anchor and the laganos on board. And here you see Alexandros Sotiriou and his Hublot watch showing off a bronze ring, which is part of the ship's rigging elements, and in his right hand, 2.1 meter long bronze spear, which is certainly a statue element from a yet-to-be-discovered statue. And here's Phil Short, our chief diver, holding the business end of that spear. We recovered some other ceramics. We'll do ancient DNA analysis of the cargo vessels, the amphoras that were on board. And that brings us to our futuristic friend who you can visit downstairs, the Exosuit. The Exosuit allows a person to go to 300 meters depth all day long in comfort and in safety without having to pay any decompression penalty on the way back to the surface. So we can put an archaeologist, a trained archaeologist, who isn't necessarily a trained technical diver, down on the shipwreck site, and he can loiter all day long and get his nose right into the shipwreck. This is a technology for the future of underwater science. And here you see a spacewalk underneath the Hellenic Navy vessel an archaeology walk back into the past with Ed O'Brien, looking up at the hull of the ship. And with the help of Hublot and the other sponsors that we have, we'll return to the Antikythera Shipwreck in June and continue mapping what has developed into a much larger site than we previously imagined. Perhaps 300 meters of debris spread along this shoreline at a depth down to 60, 70 meters, or maybe even deeper. Exosuit helps us get there and extract the secrets from the Titanic of the ancient world. So thank you, Matthias, thank you, Hublot, and thank you for your attention.
Voilà, bonjour. Au nom de Hublot, je suis Mathias Butet.
So I am Mathias Butet, Director of Research and Development at Hublot, and we have worked a lot on the Antikythera mechanism to make it a watch movement. So we'll not spend time to explain the Antikythera mechanism. It's too long, so we won't torture you. But some time ago I've asked a special mission to Brendan to find a whole team, sport team, Greek or Roman, with leg protectors, so that we can link the treasure to our sponsorship in the sports. Because within the next 3 years we'll carry on in supporting the Antikythera venture as a sponsors. And next year in Baselworld we'll present a horological creation which comes from the Antikythera story, but in another way. I'm Yanis Bitsakis, and I'm a member of the Antikythera Mechanisms Research Project and a collaborator at the Energy Development. And I've just two things to tell you. The whole treasure and the artifacts shown by our colleague Brendan Foley were set up for the very first time in Athens in a huge exhibition at the National Archaeological Museum. And this exhibition, thanks to Hublot and to the people here of the Basel Antiquity Museum, will be next year from September to Baselworld 2016 in Basel. So the Antikythera treasure is traveling to Switzerland. And thanks to Hublot, we also have a beautiful book done by the watch journalist Konstantin Stikas, and you can have it here with all the details about the Antikythera mechanism. That's all. Thank you very much.
The Antikythera mechanism is very, very old. And I understand that one of the puzzling questions about it is why there are no other ever seen contemporary examples of the same technology. Have we yet got an answer that might satisfy that?
The mechanism is too complex to have been a one-off. It had to lie somewhere on a trajectory of development, of technological development. And the thing that fires our imagination is we have this one fragmentary example. Perhaps only 30% or 40% of the original mechanism came up from the shipwreck. We haven't found one anywhere else, although there are some references in the ancient literature to other such devices. So when the Ministry of Culture came to me and said, come investigate the Antikythera Shipwreck, I thought, well, it's almost 1,000 years or 1,500 years too young for my actual academic scholarly interest. I'm far more interested in the Bronze Age. But this one mechanism, which is so interesting, we know where it came from, and the place where it came from has never been scientifically investigated. It makes perfect sense that there could be, if not more of the original mechanism on this shipwreck site to discover, other things that we can't even imagine. Okay, maybe not more Antikythera style mechanisms, but other artifacts, other bits of ancient technology, other luxury goods which have faded from memory. And our team now has the opportunity to go and dig in these sediments in a very controlled way, and then be the gatekeepers to share with the rest of the world this treasure, this historical treasure that lies on the seafloor. So maybe we'll get lucky. Now, in future years, what we really hope to do is continue our exploration in the very deep seafloor in the Mediterranean. The average depth of the Mediterranean is 3,000 meters. That's not too deep for us. Our vehicles from the Deep Submergence Lab at Woods Hole can go to any depth, 11,000 meters. In the Challenger Deep, we've put vehicles down at that depth. The Mediterranean seafloor is the world's largest repository. It's the greatest museum and the greatest library. By a conservative estimate, there are 750,000 ancient shipwrecks lying undiscovered on the seafloor of the Mediterranean. With our technologies, we can begin to investigate the entire sea basin. It's what's going on right now with the Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 wreckage. They're surveying the Southern Ocean seafloor. We take the exact same technology, we apply that to archaeology, and who knows what we'll find out there.
I'm fascinated by the Antikythera mechanism, and my question though is, can you explain how it's inspiring you and how you want to take this ancient artifact and bring it into the modern world and, you know, develop the Hublot inspiration?
Comment ne pas...
How one could not be interested by a device which is the oldest device, mechanical device known as today. In engineering schools, you learn that mechanics were born in the Renaissance and equal to Leonardo da Vinci.
En presque, mécanique égale Léonard de Vinci. Et là, tout d'un coup, il y a une machine qui sort et qui est en moins 150, moins 200.
And suddenly something is popping out of the water which dates back to 150 BC. How not to be fascinated? As I say, it's as if an archaeologist in Egypt discovered a cell phone within a tomb.
Et c'est très bien en fait qu'on ait fait cette pièce, que Hublot m'ait accordé.
It's very good that Hublot allowed us to build this device, and 4 were assembled, and one of them is at the museum, National Museum in Athens, and they are not to sell.
Et je peux parler au nom de toute l'équipe de recherche Hublot. On a travaillé pendant 3-4 ans sur cette...
At the Hublot R&D team, we worked 3 or 4 years on this, and it was a great lesson of humility, because we saw that we didn't know everything. I will be delighted when they will discover another device, because I'll have more years to work on this.